Welcome back to another episode on Solving the People Puzzle, where on a weekly basis I interview business owners, founders, HR executives, HR specialists around something people related. And today I'm so excited to have in studio with me Paul Kempff, who is the recently appointed CEO of the FFG Group of companies, a dear friend of mine as well as a Whamley client. In this episode, we are discussing motivation, encouragement of employees, and how to lift people up. I think it was a real, honest, vulnerable, transparent conversation around how Paul goes about doing this, and I know that you will find value in this. So sit back, enjoy, and if you like the episode, please share it with friends, colleagues, and family, anybody that you know will find value in this, and please feel free to follow us at Solving the People Puzzle on all your favorite podcast and YouTube channels. Thank you so much. Enjoy. Paul Kempff, my dear friend, a client of Whamley, it's such a privilege and an honor to have you as part of Solving the People Puzzle. Welcome.
Thank you, Francois. It's wonderful being here. We've spoken about this a lot, and we're finally here, and I'm ready to do it.
We have. It's been a couple of months since I joined you on your famous blue couch. I unfortunately do not have a couch here in my office, but it's amazing to have you here, Paul. I think, as always, Solving the People Puzzle is a podcast where the majority of the listeners are in HR or business owners or entrepreneurs following the journey around practical tips, tools, and techniques on how to change the way we deal with people on a daily basis. And so really looking forward to the insights today, getting them from you. But before we do that, as always, I would love for you to introduce yourself to the listeners and the audience.
Thanks, Francois. I hope I can provide some insights. I'm not in HR,
Yes.
but at the same time, I think I am in HR.
Yes.
Because I work with people every single day, the people of the FFG Group of companies. I've been the managing director of the FFG Group of companies for the last 9 years. And the reason why I say have been, past tense, is by the time this episode will be released, I will be the CEO of the FFG Group of companies.
Incredible. Congratulations.
Thank you. Taking over from our chairman and founder, Herman Klopper. And hopefully I can take this company, this group of companies, to the same heights that Herman has done in the past.
And the next level.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah.
I want to take you back, Paul. You said you're not in HR. However, I think that's such a valid nugget. We often look at departments in isolation, and I often hear people say, no, that's not my role, that's HR's role. But I don't want to say the word neglect, but we maybe forget the fact that we deal with people every single day, especially when you're in a managerial position like yourself. So I think that's valuable for an audience member listening going, ooh, I'm not in HR. No, if you're surrounded by or dealing with people, this is relevant. Especially because today I want to discuss motivation and I want to discuss employee engagement with you. And for the audience to take it back, I vividly remember meeting you for the very first time. We had a coffee. And I was so impressed by, and I've always said this, by your executive presence. It's no surprise to me that you've made it to CEO, and again, congratulations. But then I had the privilege of seeing you at FFG on a number of occasions, engaging with your audience and with your employees. And we got to know each other, and you have this famous thing that you started, well, I don't think you started, you've just maybe forever doing it, you can share now, where you have these sessions on a weekly basis where you deliver something to the employees. Do you want to just touch on that and share the thinking behind it and when it started, just so that the audience can understand what I mean?
Absolutely. You're talking about Friday morning communications in the FFG Group. It's a tradition that started around about the time when I became the managing director of the group, but there's no way I'm going to take credit for it. The person that actually came up with the idea was an operations manager we had in FFG in our head office in Potchefstroom by the name of Doe.
Okay.
He's the guy that really pioneered it and said we need to increase the transparency, the communication to all staff in the FFG group.
Okay.
And the whole idea behind it was on a Friday morning, we get all staff in every single branch into the boardroom.
Okay.
We connect all of the branches through Teams.
Yeah.
And we do something on a Friday morning communication where we talk to the staff.
Okay.
Now, some mornings it'll be compliance training. Other mornings it'll be HR training. But once a month, I had the privilege of doing what we call exco feedback.
Okay.
Where after we have an executive meeting in the company, I would, on a Friday morning for half an hour, tell the staff what's happening in the company. How are we doing? What's the revenue looking like?
Yes.
What kind of new business have we been able to do in the last month? What big decisions have been made?
All right.
Things like that. And during these Friday morning communications, I would share all of this information. And interestingly enough, and I'm not sure when it really started, it might have been 8 years ago, it might have even been 7 years ago, I can't really remember the date. I think one day after about 20 minutes of exco feedback, I was done. And there was like 10 minutes left in that Friday morning communication. And I felt, you know what, I'm not going to send everybody back to their offices, let's see if we can fill the gap. And it was maybe something I'd read that week that I felt I wanted to share with the staff.
Okay.
Something motivational, something inspirational.
Okay.
And that's where it started.
Okay.
And initially it was like a short, small little thing, which grew into something bigger to the extent that I, on purpose, created time in every single Friday morning communication to do something that I thought could be motivational or inspirational for the staff.
Okay.
And that's how it started.
That's
yeah.
fascinating. I often hear and read that brilliant ideas or initiatives just organically happen. You know, it's not long planned in advance or really well thought through when it starts out. You know, but you and I both have a podcast, and I've once done it and went back to listen to episode 1. I don't know if you've done that, went back to listen to episode 1, but you come up with this thing and then it just evolves and it grows and you get feedback and it takes off. And so, I mean, 7 or 8 years, it doesn't really matter. Obviously, if it lasted that long and it's still going on, then it's working. It's working, exactly. So okay, that's what it is. Another comment, and what I'm hearing you saying that's so powerful, I think, for the audience, is the value of providing feedback, the value of providing insights into decisions that are made, you know, on an exco or a manco level. I think just from a transparency perspective, what it provides the employees, like just maybe your comments on where does that land for them and the value of doing that? Because I think often we're so busy, we can neglect that.
Transparency, I think that's the first thing. I mentioned it, you mentioned it, but I think it's got a lot to do with trust as well. I think the more you communicate, the more transparent you are, and obviously if you communicate with integrity, the more trust you can create in the company on all levels. Now, let me just say something very important here. We've been doing it for a number of years. I don't think it's perfect yet. And it's important to understand. It's something that we continuously try and improve on. And your example of the podcast is perfect. Yes, I've listened to my first podcast and I've cringed at how bad it was.
As one should.
As one should, but it's the same with this Friday morning communication. It's been trial and error the whole time. Communicating the right things. And this is where I think the tricky part comes in. Motivating staff, inspiring staff, there's a fine line in how you bring across messages, in what you communicate to them. Sometimes the wrong information can be very detrimental to the mood, to the culture, to how everybody feels about the company. So it's something that you've got to curate it. You've got to decide what is it that you want to share today with the staff. What is maybe something that you should rather not share right now? You know, first wait for it to develop. And again, I think that we've come a long way since we started 9 years ago. But even last week, I had a conversation with my fellow executives about certain things that we want to say on our next Friday morning communication. And where we actually had a bit of I wouldn't say an argument, but a discussion about let's do that and that, but let's rather not do this. And don't misunderstand me, not to hide anything from staff, or mislead or anything like that. It's just about understanding how sensitive information can sometimes be.
100%.
In terms of either lifting people up or making them depressed, making them despondent. And I think that's the important part of what we're doing.
I think I love what you're touching on now, because where I want to go with this is to start by asking you, what is your foundational thinking around people and motivation? And I think without knowing what you're going to say, I think part of that And the reason I'm asking is, there's nuance and context. And when you do or do not ask or say something, given the environment, the season, the month, the mood, the week, what has happened around that leading up to the Friday morning will influence the decision around what to say. But yeah, what would you say, Paul, your thinking around people and motivation?
A couple of things that I can think of immediately that I want to share with you. I think the first one is how difficult motivation is. It's something that I struggle with on a continuous basis. Not my own motivation, but taking my own motivation and motivating others, inspiring others. And it's a frustrating journey. And what I mean by that is it's relatively easy to motivate people on a Friday morning, to lift them up, to inspire them, to get them to be passionate, think differently, exactly. The problem is Monday morning, the first client that shouts at you, or the first client that cancels a policy or does something that messes up your day, everything that you did on the Friday is forgotten. Yes. It's history. And it's a continuous thing that you need to keep on doing, this motivation. The second thing that I've found is that you're able to motivate different people differently. Some people get motivated very easily and they stay motivated for quite some time. Others would literally walk out of that same Friday morning communication and they wouldn't have received the same message. It wouldn't have the same impact on them. And here's where I found the difference. This is just something that I've experienced. I don't think long-lasting motivation is external. I think it's internal. To me, that's the foundational model. Foundational model. I can stand in front of people on a Friday morning. If somebody doesn't have that inner passion, that inner drive, that inner determination, that inner ambition to be better, to be more, to achieve more, I can say what I want. It's not going to make a long-lasting difference. Correct. Might make a difference for an hour or a day. But you need motivation inside of you. I can help that motivation come out. I can help that motivation flourish. Yes.
But you can't create it.
I can't create it, exactly.
I love that. I think to take you back, so I heard three things. The first thing I heard is it's emotionally draining. Okay, I agree with you. I think often we're able to exert and articulate the passion, and in the moment it can sound and come across as highly inspirational. And you're able to create the kumbaya or the I reckon Rassie is probably amazing at this. For the audience listening, you don't know the Springbok rugby coach, but it's not that long lasting. It's quite fleeting. But from an emotional perspective, it could be in the moment something that sparks something. The second thing I heard you say is that from an intrinsic external versus external perspective, there's actually very little that we can do if an individual does not have it. Right? If they're not at all focused on it, if it's not part of them or what they deem to be important or valuable in order to understand career success or personal success or growth at least, or just having a better day. And then the third thing I heard you say is that at the end of the day, one can only work with what you've got. But then also, very important, one size does not fit all. It is a tailored approach. And I guess when you're speaking to an audience, it's impossible to mix up the message 50, 60. I mean, you've got, what, 200 staff members? 180. That's got to be Paul in the moment. But then I reckon on an individual level, one-on-ones or in smaller groups there, you would be able to tailor the message in relation to what the employee needs or who they are.
Exactly. You can't cater for everyone when you speak to an audience of 180. But you do have the advantage that you can easily follow that up with a one-on-one with somebody, where you do tailor-make to their personality, to how they're thinking, to how they're feeling on that day. I want to add a fourth point, if you don't mind, before you move to the next question, which again to me is absolutely foundational to how I think about motivation and inspiration, and that is being an example. I find this at the FFG Group in our company, but it's almost the same for me in my podcast, where I speak about things and I say things to people. I think this is the way you should do this. This is the way you should live your life like this. And the one thing that I'm incredibly careful of is being a hypocrite.
Yeah.
You know, telling people to do things in a certain way and then I don't do that myself. And I think part of inspiration and motivation is to not only talk about it, but to live it, to do it yourself. And that's why, for me, it's incredibly important that you must be an example. But there you're right, it is emotionally draining. It puts a lot of pressure on you to at all times be aware of how you live, how you say things, and what you do.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I think for me, when I think about this point you're describing now, it's the authentic part and that transparency that we spoke about in the introduction. Is Paul or Franco, whoever else, believable? Because the second you are not, or you're not living what you're saying, or there's just this natural, whatever, this sounds great, or does he, what book or podcast or bumper sticker did he now read? Versus that like real, authentic, vulnerable, don't do what I say, look at what I do.
There's a saying, I'm trying to see if I can get it right, and again, it's something I heard from somebody else, and it's say what you do and do what you say.
Sure.
I think that's exactly it, yeah.
Yeah. Paul, you mentioned something earlier, curation was your word. And for me, that's planning in advance. What or how do you practically go about preparing for these Friday sessions?
I'm laughing simply because it's going to expose a massive weak point of mine.
Okay.
And that's procrastination.
All right.
And it's been 7 or 8 years that I've been doing it, and I still haven't got it right.
Okay.
I know 3 weeks in advance, that Friday, on that date at 8:30, I'm going to talk to all the staff. I've got half an hour. And obviously the Exco feedback part is pretty simple. We have an Exco, I make notes of the things that I want to share with the staff. Bang, 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 done. But then you've got your 10, 15 minutes that you want to fill the time with something motivational, something inspirational. And I think I can count it on one hand, the number of times that I finished my Friday morning communication on a Thursday. And here's the scary thing. I think about what I want to say.
Yeah.
I change my mind a lot of times.
Yes.
But probably about 90% of the time, I will get up at 4 on a Friday morning and I will cram it. For the next 3 hours, I would sit there, I would put on earphones with music to help me focus, because I use music to focus. And then for the next 3 hours, I would just figure out what I want to say in that 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay.
And it's dangerous.
Okay.
If you oversleep, it's going to be a problem. If a crisis occurs and you can't spend that focused time, it's going to be a problem. Luckily, I've never ever had nothing to say.
Yes.
I've always had something.
Yes.
Sometimes my preparation is better than other times, but virtually always it's on a Friday morning at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I sit and I cram the preparation. Okay. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm admitting it. It's my procrastination weak point in my life.
Yeah.
But very importantly, the preparation is solid. Yeah. Because I've been thinking about it for a week.
Exactly.
Every book I read, every podcast I watch, every YouTube video I watch, I'm looking for things that I can use on Friday morning communication. Yes. So that by the time I get up at 4 o'clock, I've got an idea of what I want to say, and I just need to formulate it, curate it.
Two things. Firstly, brilliant self-awareness. I think the ability to understand development areas and then to be able to voice them is a sign of deep maturity. So that's perfectly fine. We all have them. Secondly, planning and preparation does not have a single definition. The fact that you are thinking about it, that there are resources in your life that is aiding, even on a subconscious level, the thinking pattern, and then 3 hours dedication to it. I would be surprised if someone who said they're preparing weeks in advance, actually, if you count all the time together, spend more than 3 hours in any way. I think the point here is you're not winging it, and you're not talking nonsense to fill the gap. rather than say nothing, then try and wing it. Again, back to vulnerable, authentic transparency.
I'm a very big believer in preparation.
Yes.
Preparation to me is a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Whether it's a presentation to clients, whether it's an exco meeting that I have to lead, whether it's a Friday morning communication, you will never, ever see me pitch up unprepared.
Well, I mean, I know you well, and I know that's the truth, so you're not just saying it, I've seen you do it. Paul, I want to take the conversation to the individual, all right? So we've spoken about some sort of definitional framework, we've spoken about nuance, we've spoken about emotional load, we've spoken about preparation. Have you engaged post these conversations where you present this with individuals that then give you feedback? Have you seen change? Because one of the most difficult realizations that I've had in my career, I'm 37 now, just a side comment as an industrial psychologist, you know, when you're studying and people ask you, like, what does an org psychologist do? One of the go-to one-liners around the braai is, we change people's behavior in the organization. And I've, over the years, had to accept that, one, I cannot change people's behavior, and two, even more devastating, is some people's behavior will never change. And I'm still trying to figure that out, and I'm still trying to work that out for myself, because I don't want to see that as a failure in my own belief in humans, but I've just seen it often enough to know that it is true. So one, here's my question. Have you seen change? And have you also not seen change? And then what is your logical and emotional approach towards that going forward?
Yes, I have seen change in individuals, and it's one of the greatest aspects of my work and of my life, is to see the impact you can have on people, the positive impact you can have on their lives. It is incredibly gratifying, but at the same time hugely frustrating, because it is unfortunately in the minority. I'm not seeing 70% of the people making the change. I'm not seeing myself having an impact on 80% of the people. We're talking about the minority. Unfortunately, a lot of people, it's as if the message is just not getting through. It's not having the effect that we wanted to have. But on those individuals where I can see the impact, I love the fact that it goes even further than this. One of the favorite things about my job is mentoring. I absolutely love it. And I know it might be weird to some listeners. You know, I'm a busy man. I've got a job that requires a lot of my time. And yet, it's rare for me to say no to somebody that comes and asks for mentoring. Yes. Because it's an aspect of my job that I absolutely love. Yes. Because this is somebody that I know want to change, want to improve, want to better themselves. They are prepared to put in the effort. So immediately I know that I will have an impact. Yes. And seeing how from a Friday morning communication somebody would come to me and say, wow, this morning's message was incredible. Firstly, can I have the presentation? I want to share it with my family. And secondly, would you mind if we have a follow-up session next week? Sit for an hour and let's just talk, because I want to dig deeper into what you've discussed this morning. I absolutely love it when that happens. And it's, as I've said, it's an incredibly gratifying thing. I just wish the impact could have been bigger, and we can, you and me, we can have that effect on more people, have that impact on more people.
I vividly remember spending time with a clinical psychologist the one day, and I was curious, and I said, yeah, isn't your job emotional, like unbelievably emotionally draining? And the answer was a certain, what do you mean? Like, people with their problems, like, it's impossible. And they said, I facilitate a process, and it's not my job to get my patients to respond. It's my job to create a platform and a narrative. And that for me was incredibly eye-opening. And to this day, when I think of behavior and behavioral change and motivation, I think there's an opportunity to release the pressure to go, am I creating the platform? Am I living the example? And am I open for feedback and questions? And I think if one can do that, then the burden is not on you to transform others, but rather to create that space for them to be transformed if they want to.
It's a great way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Paul, I want to end us off. Someone's listening right now and they're going, I want to do this. Like, this sounds exciting, inspirational, this Friday thing, whatever you want to call it. Where do they start?
I'm going to give you the answer of where do you start if you want to start a podcast? Because I think the answer is the same.
Yes.
Don't wait for perfect.
Yes.
Just start somewhere. It doesn't matter that it's maybe not great in the beginning. I think you've experienced it, I've experienced with my podcast, and I think it's true in our business as well. And I think that first Friday morning communication, if I had to really go back and look at it again, I would cringe.
Yeah.
But that's the point. Just start somewhere, get feedback, change it, improve it, keep on going, get started, don't wait for perfect, and don't quit. That's really where I would start.
Get started, don't wait for perfect, and don't quit. Paul, thank you so much for your wisdom, your insights. This has been exceptional and exceptionally valuable to have you here on Solving the People Puzzle with me. I really appreciate your time.
It was wonderful being here. I can't believe how the time has flown.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Francois.
Cheers.